I'm here today with Tina Cho. Tina is the author of several books, including Rice from Heaven, a picture book from Little B Books, Korean Celebrations, a nonfiction picture book, My Breakfast with Jesus, a nonfiction picture book, The Ocean Calls, a mermaid Heian-Yao.
Kenya.
I know I'm not pronouncing it. Henyo?
Uh-huh.
Henyo story. And her first middle grade novel in verse, The Other Side of Tomorrow, will come out in the fall of 2023. She's also written The Girl's Guide to Manners and all that great stuff, and over 100 guided reading books from Lakeshore Learning, Compass Media, Oxford University Press, Literacy Planet, and the Moffat Girls. She taught at an international school in South Korea, but she moved back to her home state of Iowa. Tina received an MS in education from Drake University and a BS in elementary education from Faith Baptist Bible College. Tina was also a featured speaker at one of our recent Writing for Your Life children's book conferences. So Tina, it's really wonderful to have you join us today.
Thank you.
Well, congratulations on, all that you've accomplished. You've really written a lot and, contributed to, the literary world tremendously. So congratulations for all of
Thank you. All because of God.
that. Well, it's wonderful to see how, the Spirit has worked so much through you. I mean, that's really great to see. So before we dive into your books, though, maybe you can just kind of give us a little bit more flavor of your background overall.
Sure. So I grew up in Iowa, and I became a teacher. This will be my 18th year, starting in the fall, teaching. I've taught all around the world now. So Iowa, Virginia, Arizona, South Korea, and we also lived in California, but I didn't teach there. But I started writing in 2008 when I was living in California. Being a kindergarten and elementary teacher made me fall in love with picture books, so I thought I would look into how to write them. So I Googled that on the internet. I discovered an organization called SCBWI, the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, and they hooked me up with a fabulous Christian writer in the California area named Nancy I. Sanders. And she invited me into her in-person writing group. And from that group, I learned how to write for children. And I started out with work for hire projects and writing for Clubhouse Junior, a children's magazine for Focus on Your Family. And I've been writing lesson plans, guided reading books, and then I've taken some picture book classes. And now I have 4 picture books published. And then, like you said, the middle grade coming out soon.
Wow.
So
that's a wonderful journey. And I mean, good for you for doing all that work, to make it happen. So I've been over to South Korea myself a couple of times, and I really enjoyed Seoul. I predominantly was in Seoul the entire time I was there. But tell us a little bit, how long were you there? Where were you located?
So we lived there for 10 years.
Okay.
So I married a guy from Korea. We met in Iowa. He was going to Iowa State, and I was the church pianist. And so I saw him, and we connected, got married. But anyway, his father still lives there and asked him to come help with the family business. So we moved 10 years ago, and I homeschooled my kids for 5 years while we were there because they didn't speak the language. And then my friend asked me to come teach at the international school, and I kept telling her, no, I don't want to teach in a foreign country. And finally I did, and loved it, and learned a lot about, people from all around the world, and just learned the culture and how to cook Korean foods. And now all of my picture books have Korean themes running in them.
Wow.
So it was all of God's will.
Well, I mean, I feel that spending time in other countries, and immersing yourself as much as you can in other cultures is really important and a great experience.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that's really going to be meaningful for your children too.
Right. Mm-hmm. They miss it a lot.
Do they really?
Yeah.
So, well, I'm glad that you all were able to do both. I mean, that's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you could start off with kind of your early picture books and, then kind of how's that progressed from there.
Okay, sure. So when I was teaching in a city called Ijeonbu in South Korea, my co-teacher helped with a church ministry teaching English to North Korean refugees. And they were going to do an event where they send these huge balloons over the border to North Korea that would carry rice, only rice. And so I thought that sounded interesting. And so I asked her if I could help, and she said yes. And so my first book, Rice from Heaven, The Secret Mission to Feed North Koreans, is all about this event. And it was illustrated by Kum Jun-sang, published by Little Bee Books in 2018. It came out, it's been so long, I can't even remember all the statistics. And so this was in 2016 is when I helped with the event. And I fictionalized it to protect the refugees. I didn't use their real names and stuff. But in the back is, I don't know if you can see this very well, a photo of the event. So they wait for a stormy night when it's very windy to send the balloons up over the border. And the ironic thing is the Korean government sends out 2 police to make sure everything's going smoothly, and the government tracks the balloons. So, but now
they know where they go.
But now, because of the relationship between the North and South about the balloon issue, I don't know if you've heard of that recently.
No.
They've banned South Koreans from sending balloons over the border.
Ah, wow.
So organizations like Voice of the Martyrs Korea or this organization, they have to think of more creative ways of getting the Bible into North Korea. This is one of my favorite spreads here.
Nice.
They're in South Korea, North Korea. So that's this book. And in the back, just back matter about Korea, a little bit about the Korean War, and things like that. And then this one, the Morning Calm Award, given by international schools in South Korea in 2020.
Cool. Very nice.
Yeah. So that was my first book.
Okay. Good. What's next?
Okay, book number 2 actually started before Rice from Heaven. This is a nonfiction book about the Korean holidays, Korean celebrations, festivals, holidays, and traditions, illustrated by Farida Zaman, and it came out from Tuttle. It came out in 2019, but it actually started in 2011 because I sent a query to the publisher asking them if they would like to have a book about Korean holidays, because they had one about Japanese holidays, Filipino holidays. Do they want one on Korean holidays?
Good for you. That's great.
And they said yes, and just send a proposal. So I spent time working on that. And then it took a while for them to find just the right illustrator and things. So this took a longer time coming out.
Sure.
So there are games and recipes, things about all the holidays. Here's a game. So this book also came about because while I was living in Korea, the first couple years, it seemed like there was a holiday every single month, and I couldn't keep track of them, and I wanted to teach my children. So that's another reason why I wrote this one, Korean
Wonderful.
Celebrations.
Very cool.
Yeah. Okay, book number 3 is my first Christian book. This is called My Breakfast with Jesus. This is illustrated by Guy Wolek and came out from Harvest House last summer during the pandemic, 2020. This book started with an idea from my agent. She said, Tina, why don't you come up with a picture book using John 21, where Jesus feeds breakfast to his disciples. And it could be a book about food and hospitality. So I was thinking, at this time I was teaching in Pyeongtaek, and I had children from all around the world. So lunchtime, when if they brought their home lunch, there were just lots of various foods. And even walking the streets in Seoul, there are people from all over the world and lots of different foods. So for this book, I wanted to show children around the world eating various breakfasts and sharing Jesus' love and how to be kind and serving each other. So that's what this book is about. So it starts with Jesus sharing his breakfast. And then we start in Iowa, because that's where I am. And then from there we go to various places. Brazil, of course, Korea is in here. India, Russia, China, Korea, Australia, and then some other surprising places around the world.
Cool. That's very neat, interesting. I mean, breakfasts are so different from country to country.
Right. Yeah. And then book number 4 is The Ocean Calls, a Haenyeo Mermaid story. And this book is getting a lot of recognition. This also came out last summer during the pandemic. This was illustrated by Jess X. Snow and published by Kokila, which is an imprint of Penguin Random House. And this book started in 2016. Someone tweeted about the Haenyeo, and I thought, oh, that's so fascinating. So I Googled them, and I found out that they were in Korea, just like I was. And so I researched them for a long time and then wrote up the first draft. And my critique group then said, add more sensory details. So in order to do that, I needed to see them. So I asked my husband, how far is Jeju, which is the island where they're at? And it was just like a 30-minute flight and very cheap.
Wow.
So we went there during my spring breaks and took pictures and talked to them. And
I know
so
it's an amazing story what they do. Maybe you could tell folks a little bit about that.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
very unique.
So these are women divers. Most of them are 50 to 80 years old. They dive into the ocean without any breathing apparatus, and they catch sea creatures and sell them and cook them at the restaurants. They've been doing this for hundreds of years, and it's like a tradition that's passed down. However, lately, the tradition is kind of dying off because it is a very dangerous job, and the daughters would rather not do this. So it's under UNESCO too, a protected tradition. So I wrote this story, fictionalized it with a little girl who wants to be a Haenyeo like her granddaughter. So this is Dayan. And she is scared to dive into the deep waters, which a lot of children are scared to swim in deep water and stuff. So I'll show you some pages here. Here they're getting suited up. This is my favorite spread here. And then, let's see. They're going to go diving down into the ocean. And then there is back matter. This is the hardest part to write, all the facts about the Haenyeo. So this has gotten a lot of recognition. It is a Freeman Book Award honorable mention for Asian literature. It got 4 stars, so a star from Kirkus School Library Journal, Book List Publishers Weekly. It's a Virginia Reads selection on the Cooperative Children's Book Center list. It's a Junior Library Guild Gold Star selection. And it's going to come out as a animated short movie in another year and a half from 9 Story Media.
Wow, how wonderful.
So, yeah.
That's just great. Why do you think that it's gotten such reception?
I think it's because it's diverse and it's an intergenerational story that features these elderly women as strong women. It has a really good plot with a familiar problem of a child who's scared to do something, but I think also because of just the Haenyeo are so fascinating. And
it is such a unique story. I can certainly,
and it's based on real live women.
Right.
I think, who are still doing it today. So I think that's why.
Well, congratulations. I mean, that's really wonderful to hear that it's done so well.
Thank you. Yeah. So that's it for picture books right now.
Yeah, and so I mentioned in the introduction that you're doing a middle grade graphic novel. That's quite a departure from, the previous books. Why did you decide to do that?
So actually I didn't. It was supposed to be a picture book.
Well, that's funny.
I know. So when I was living in Korea and going to the churches, most of the churches have a North Korean ministry. So I had never heard of a North Korean refugee when I was living in the States. So it piqued my interest and God gave me that passion, I think. And so I started researching about the North Korean refugees and their escapes. There's something called the Asian Underground Railroad, where they cross the river, go into China. They hide in China for maybe even up to 2 years. And then they make their way through Laos into Thailand. Once they get to Thailand, they will either go to South Korea or they will go to other countries that accept them, like Europe, England, United States.
Wow.
And
quite a saga, quite a journey.
And so during my research, most of the articles talked about this one mastermind behind the escapes, a pastor in South Korea, Pastor Chung Gi-won. So I looked him up and I interviewed him with my husband, and he has a church in South Korea in Seoul and a little North Korean refugee school, because a lot of these kids, when they come to South Korea, they are bullied and get made fun of because they are smaller, their accent is different, and so he helps them acclimate to the culture and stuff. So I interviewed 2 of the kids, and then I tried to write their story as a picture book, but my critique groups were saying it's just too much information for a picture book. And so why don't you try it as a middle grade novel? So I had never written a middle grade novel before. So I took a self-paced class about writing a middle grade novel from my friend Nancy Sanders. And then I heard about this contest through Scholastic Asia. They have a Scholastic Asian Book Award. And so just for fun, I submitted it to them. And then I got an email saying that it was going to be shortlisted for this award. Would I fly to Singapore for that? And I was teaching at the time. So I got off and I flew from Seoul to Singapore, and it actually won what we would call second place, but they call it first runner up. So I was just so amazed.
That's wonderful.
And then Scholastic Asia wanted to publish it, but eventually I said no, because the editor didn't want to make that many corrections and revisions, and I knew it was full of mistakes because it was my first novel ever, and then they weren't going to pay that much either. So I had gotten my agent at this time, so I had talked about it with her too. And so she said she would help me with revisions and try to sell it here in the United States. So we went through lots of revisions and got lots of rejections. And then my agent said, why don't I try it as a novel in verse? Well, I had never written a novel in verse. I don't feel like I'm a poet. So took another webinar and read lots of mentor texts on novel and verses, and then turned it into a middle grade novel in verse. And then it caught the editor's eye at HarperCollins. And then she had the idea to turn it into a graphic novel. So I read comics when I was little, like Garfield and stuff like that. I don't read superhero comics and
Books
stuff.
becoming more popular, right? I mean,
Right. So I looked into like graphic novels. I have changed a lot. So I read some about the Holocaust that I really liked. And so I thought, okay, she found an illustrator who did some sketches just so we could see what it might look like. And so I said yes. So now it is going to come out in 2023, and I've gone through 3 pencil sketches from the illustrator. Because it's based on a real story and stuff, they are allowing me to go through and make comments also.
And
So
which
I don't have a cover or anything yet.
which imprint within HarperCollins is going to publish?
So they have a new imprint called Harper Alley, and it's all graphic novels.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So my book is called, we changed the title because it was The Tune Without Words. Now it's going to be The Other Side of Tomorrow, illustrated by Deborah Lee. She's a Korean American. And yeah, so I'm just anxiously awaiting more batches of illustrations and seeing the cover soon. Yeah.
Well, that's exciting. Good for you. Boy, I mean, to be able to change genre that dramatically takes a lot of work.
Yeah, it does.
Well, but maybe it'll open up another avenue for you going forward too, that you could do more books in either area.
Right. Yeah.
Is that kind of what you're thinking of doing? Or?
Well, I have an idea for another middle grade, but it's a lot of work.
Yeah. What about future picture books? Do you think you'll do some more of those too?
Yeah, I have some with my agent that she's shopping around to publishers. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. So I'm always writing.
So have you seen any change in the receptivity to books from Asian American authors like you compared to what it was, a few years ago?
Yes, I have. So like recently, it seems like the market is exploding with diverse picture books, especially with Asian American authors. So I've been checking them out from my library and trying to showcase them on my Instagram because of all the racial unrest with Asian Americans and other cultures. Publishers want to get literature into the hands of people. And I think that no matter what your culture is or your skin type, if you can read these diverse books to your children, it will open up mirrors and windows, like they say.
Absolutely. I think it's very important and long overdue. Well, it's good to hear that there's better receptivity, and I'm really glad about the success that your books have had.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, Tina, it was really wonderful to learn about all your books in more depth. Thanks so much for spending some time to share that with us.
You're welcome. Thanks.
And good luck with your future releases.
All right. Thank you so much for having me.